Are you ready to take your business to the next level? Every day, there are countless books and articles that are published offering the key on how to make your business a success. It's easy to feel overwhelmed trying to keep up and run your business. That's why Deb Creer created the Business Power Hour. Keep up on the latest trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. Let the Business Power Hour do the heavy work for you.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Deb Creer, and I am passionate about giving professionals the tools that they need to make themselves and their businesses as successful as possible. And, this happens every once in a while. I talk to a guest where I know absolutely nothing about what they're going to be talking about. And I love those conversations, right? Because I get to learn along with our audience. And we're going to have so much fun today. So please join me in welcoming Taylor Costa Van Putten to our program today. Welcome, Taylor. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Deb. I am doing well. Reaching you from New York City here. We're in our Midtown Manhattan offices looking out over Central Park. It's a beautiful gray day, 40 degrees. It was spring a little while back, but we've regressed.
I know. Spring not, right? And I'm in Atlanta where it's raining hard. So hopefully our power doesn't just all of a sudden disappear, which is, tends to happen every once in a while here. So let me tell people a little bit about you, and then we will jump into this because it is going to be a fascinating discussion. So Taylor Costa Van Putten is the president of Brayburn Whiskey in the United States. He is also a licensed and registered securities broker and former financial planner and fiduciary financial advisor across several institutions in the United States. Well, first of all, you're not selling whiskey. I know that. But tell us a little bit more about how it is that you got to where you are today, and then we will really jump into this.
Well, at the end of the day, I am selling whiskey.
True.
It's not whiskey for drinking. It's whiskey for profit, for diversification, for wealth management. But, the journey here has been interesting, to say the least. And that's because this is an interesting asset class. And it takes, I think, unique people to get into projects like this. So I have worked in financial services coming up on 8 years now as a registered securities broker, investment advisor. For many years, that was working in traditional assets or traditional wealth management, stocks and bonds, good old fashioned stocks, bonds, and cash. And, I found in the last couple of years, as we entered the pandemic and some of the economic and market turmoil, it just became very obvious to me, and really anybody who was looking at it, that these cornerstone asset classes that we all use in our 401ks and stock and bond portfolios to grow wealth in the long term, we're obviously in for many years to come of potential volatility and shakiness and uncertainty. There's always volatility in these markets, but we're experiencing some record ups and downs these days. So I wanted to make sure that I was working in an area that could really actually help people protect and diversify their wealth. And what we've seen in the last decade or so in particular in financial services is the explosion of alternative assets.
Okay.
And alternative just means everything that's not stocks and bonds. So I found my way into fine art investing with the largest buyer and seller of art in the world.
Okay.
And I was located by this group of Scottish entrepreneurs who asked me, Taylor, do you want to bring Scottish and Japanese whiskey to America for the first time as a securitized and regulated asset class? And I said, of course I do. Who wouldn't want to be a pioneer and bring something to America for the first time, especially something that this country is so passionate and excited about, which is whiskey. That's where how we got here. And we've been here in America for close to 1 year, even though we've been operating internationally with a lot of success for the better part of a decade. We've opened up the Whiskey Vault here in Midtown Manhattan, which is behind me, and started our offering roughly a year ago.
I love it. And it is financial planning, all of those things are very confusing. And, no matter what, folks, we want to make sure that you talk with your trusted financial advisors and planners before you do anything. So, always make sure that, that you're doing that. But, or at least do your own research. That's the thing. Okay, so I have one of those simple, basic questions to start with. Brayburn whiskey is Whisky. And we also know that there is whiskey with an E. Explain the difference.
Yeah. Well, whiskey is a huge global class
Mm-hmm.
of spirit, of
Right.
alcoholic
Mm-hmm.
beverage. It's largely made by grains around the world,
Mm-hmm.
but you can find American whiskey, you can
Right.
find Irish,
Mm-hmm.
Indian,
Mm-hmm.
Japanese. I've had Australian whiskey
Mm-hmm.
recently that was pretty good. Um, and all of these things are effectively the same thing. They're
Mm-hmm.
grains that have been distilled into a strong alcoholic
Mm-hmm.
beverage. But two countries and two countries only, which are the two countries that we focus on,
Mm-hmm.
spell whiskey with a Y. And that's
Okay.
because they're pretty intrinsically connected.
Mm-hmm.
Scotland, which has been making whiskey for at
Mm-hmm.
least 500 years at this
Mm-hmm.
point that we have records
Mm-hmm.
on, and Japan, which recently had their 100-year anniversary.
And that just baffles me. I had never heard of Japanese whiskey.
Nobody has heard of Japanese whiskey until they exploded on the international
Mm-hmm.
scene with a lot of awards in the
Mm-hmm.
last 20 years. And now everybody wants Japanese
Mm-hmm.
whiskey. So you can't really get it. That's why
Mm-hmm.
it can be such an attractive investment. Scarcity.
Right.
If you want something that a lot of people want
Mm-hmm.
and there's not enough of,
Mm-hmm.
that can be quite good for the owner of the asset. But we're in Japanese and Scotch whiskey,
Mm-hmm.
which is whiskey with no E,
Mm-hmm.
because we see those marketplaces and those
Mm-hmm.
spirits as being some of the most premium investment grade whiskey on the planet. And that has to do with the heritage,
Mm-hmm.
the brand, the recognition of the quality of the spirit, the fact that they are, to a degree, the gold standard of whiskey
Mm-hmm.
around the world, and the fact that people pay really good money for old Scottish and Japanese whiskeys.
Right.
That's how our clients can profit.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I love the tradition of it. It's especially in Scotland, because hello, that's me. I am a good chunk of me is Scottish, and I have toured in Scotland, several big distilleries there, and just thought they were great. But it is that history and that culture and that passion. And I love the fact I was on your website. So again, that's Brayburn Whiskey, and you have a flyover tour of Brayburn Whiskey, of the estate. And I just, I love all that. Like I said, I totally geek out on some of those things. And I think that, is part of, as you said, kind of that appeal is, there is that rich history. So talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, there's an extraordinary mystique. The
Mm-hmm.
entire nation of Scotland is
Mm-hmm.
geographically beautiful,
Mm-hmm.
ancient history, castles, lakes,
Mm-hmm.
moors, meadows, glens. And whiskey has been an inherent part of the culture for literally hundreds of years, at least that we have a
Mm-hmm.
record of. It could go way, way back.
Right. They grow up drinking it, right? Mm-hmm.
And I mean, yes. So, heritage and the fact that Scottish whiskey
Mm-hmm.
has been a regulated spirit, meaning the quality has been tightly controlled
Right.
by His Majesty's
Mm-hmm.
regulatory bodies for literally 200 years now,
Mm-hmm.
means that globally people expect Scotch whiskey to be
Mm-hmm.
the incredible whiskey that it is. And so
Right.
that's why it commands such a premium price.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a pretty small country
Mm-hmm.
that is feeding the world with the most exported spirit on the planet. So,
Right.
again, big supply and demand issue, and that's how a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people can benefit.
Mm-hmm.
But the heritage, we have offices in Edinburgh, Glasgow, those ancient cities. We have an office in Shanghai,
Mm-hmm.
here in New York City, in Barcelona. We've got warehouses where we've got to hold our barrels of
Mm-hmm.
whiskey for our clients and for ourselves, peppered around Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
So, anybody who owns a barrel of whiskey with us is very invited to come and visit their cask or even
Mm-hmm.
enjoy a dram. If you're an investor at a certain level, we'll
Mm-hmm.
get you an all expenses paid trip out to Scotland.
Ooh.
We'd love to host you at some of our
Mm-hmm.
offices and let you enjoy the fruits of your investment.
I love that. Now, this is not an inexpensive prospect. Let me just put it that way. This is for the more discriminating investors, might be the best way to put it. And I mean, there's obviously people can invest anywhere from 50 cents to hundreds of thousands of dollars. But I love this fact that it is much more for the discriminating investor. You can give those tours, all of those things. And I think, to me, I love that because you're really showing them how much you value them, as an investor. And I like that idea. And again, it's not for everyone. And anybody who is interested should talk to you about that. But it's it is much more. And I think part of it is that mystique, that history, that culture.
Yeah. Well, for us, there are thresholds or requirements or minimums to be able to participate in the offer, just so it's clear. We are, like I mentioned earlier, an SEC regulated issuer of securities, right? The government knows my name. They have my background, my fingerprints. They take
this is very reputable, folks. This is not fly by night.
Right. Yeah. So the SEC has rules about who's allowed to participate in private or alternative or off-market investments like what we do. So a person does need to be, in order to participate, what's called an accredited investor, which is a pretty broad swath of American society. There are millions of people who are eligible in this country. But generally, to be eligible to participate in the offering that we have and other private or alternative offerings, you need to be earning around $200,000 in income annually on a personal level, or $300,000 jointly together with your spouse, or have a net worth of $1 million plus, excluding the residence where you live, your primary residence.
Okay.
Once you have met those qualifications, or if you meet those qualifications, people can come on board and work with us with a minimum investment of around $50,000 US. Some people start at 50, some people work with us at $1 million, and everything in between. It just depends on your financial situation and what makes the most sense for you.
Right. And I have to put my marketing hat on now, because obviously we talk a lot on this program about who your target market is. And I've worked with so many people who, when I say, who is your target market? Excuse me, they look at me, they smile sweetly, and they say, everyone.
Yeah, right.
And I don't care what the product is. No, you are not trying to reach everyone. And for any business, you absolutely have to figure out who you're trying to reach. And, we've got lots of different names for it. We've got target market, we've got avatars, we've got all of those things. And, obviously you have done that. You've done that very, very well. And what I love about it, and for anybody, whatever your business is and what you're selling is, the first thing is people are kind of self-opted out, right? They know this sounds interesting, this sounds fun, but I can't do that. I can't buy that car. I can't, do whatever. They just know I'm not in that market. So they've kind of self-opted out. And so as the business, what that means is you're not spending time marketing to people who cannot buy from you. And I've told this story several times where, I was at a networking event one time, and we go around the room like you do, right? And it was, what do you sell and who are you trying to reach? And this woman sold skincare products. And because we all have skin, she said, my target audience is everyone. And we all went, oh, that's nice. And then we thought about it, and she got no referrals from us, none at all. I mean, we all had skin, but none of us could refer to her, right? So worked with her to develop the fact that she still needed to have that niche. So what she said was she sells skincare products for teenage boys with acne. And immediately we all went, we know those, right? Yeah. So then we could refer to her. Now, obviously she could sell the product to anybody, but, so then it, kind of expanded a bit to teenage girls, older, all sorts of things. But the second she had that niche, we all knew somebody we should refer to her. And so, that's what I love about, what you have done. And you, like you just said, you are very clear about who it is, who you are trying to at least have an initial discussion with, and who is just going to think, wow, this is fun. And they watch the video of the estate and go, that's pretty, and I love that. And so, why did you decide to really be this high end type of investment?
Well, it is a high end investment. Realistically, Scotch whiskey is
the premium product.
The premium product. We only deal in single malt whiskey from high end young brands, right, and high end brands with incredible heritage. So, although there's money to be made on every level, whether it's bottom shelf, mid shelf, or top shelf, most people know instinctively that you bet on luxury products
Right.
and luxury asset classes because they're bought by
Mm-hmm.
wealthy people.
Mm-hmm.
And wealthy people generally are going to do well in
Mm-hmm.
most economies, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's why multi-million-dollar Picasso paintings sold their value.
Mm-hmm.
That's why incredibly expensive collectible cars maintain their value. The
Mm-hmm.
marketplace, the people that are
Mm-hmm.
interested in these, the demand for them
Right.
is supplied
Mm-hmm.
by a class of
Mm-hmm.
people around the world who
Mm-hmm.
are pretty well insulated from
Right.
economic turmoil. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the reasons that makes
Mm-hmm.
premium Scotch whiskey
Mm-hmm.
so stable and attractive,
Mm-hmm.
generally speaking.
Right.
So it's not so much a decision of ours
Mm-hmm.
as it's just the reality of the
Mm-hmm.
asset class of the product that we deal in. It
Right.
it has spent hundreds of years building up that heritage, that
Mm-hmm.
air and reputation of
Mm-hmm.
quality, and that's why we're here today. We want to bring it to the world.
Right. Well, and let's be honest, kind of no matter what happens with the economy, and especially sometimes if it goes south, spirits tend to get consumed more.
People
Now
drink on
Mhm.
in good times, people drink in bad times, people drink on a Wednesday night at 4
Yeah,
p.m., right?
yeah. Now, yeah, Scotch whiskey is more expensive. That's why I don't drink it very often because, it is very much a treat. And it was really funny because I remember in one of the places we were in, when we were touring in Scotland, we were talking about how very smooth it was. A lot of times you see people, take a sip and they make the face, right? Because it burns all the way down. And oh, Scotch whiskey, no, it's very smooth. But the gentleman who was doing the tour, he said, if you want something that burns, go have some bourbon.
Yeah. Yeah, he's honest, right? Yeah.
And we just thought that was really funny. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's an investment that is obviously going to hold its value over time. So, I joked at the start that you weren't selling whiskey, and you are, but you're not selling, you're not going to liquor stores, you're not doing all of those things. So when someone invests, they're actually buying a cask? Is that how that works?
Yeah. So you were just talking about, the smoothness of Scotch
Mm-hmm,
whiskey,
mm-hmm.
and I think we should back up to that
Okay.
because a lot
See,
of that
I do squirrel a lot, so.
scroll all day. I'll scroll with you. That smoothness, that
Mhm,
drinkability, the roundness and complexity of Scotch
mhm,
whiskey
mhm.
comes for the most part from the aging and maturation
Right.
process, which
Mhm,
is in any kind of spirit around the world, whether we're
mhm,
talking about bourbon or Irish or
mhm,
American or Japanese,
mhm,
it all comes from having the spirit live and rest and
mhm.
mature
Right.
in a wooden barrel.
Mhm,
It's actually the chemical action of
mhm,
the whiskey leaching into the
mhm,
wood and being squeezed out with
mhm,
temperature cycles that changes the spirit.
mhm,
It takes away a lot of the harshness. It gives
mhm,
it incredible depth and richness of flavor
mhm,
and complexity, and it smooths it out. It makes it a
mhm,
lot more enjoyable over time. Now, the reason why the guy said you want to, have something harsh, go drink a bourbon.
mhm.
No offense to bourbons, but most bourbons are aged for 2 years.
Right. Mhm.
It's
And that's
young.
why they're
It's
also mixed in a lot of
That's why
times with
they're
something
often
else.
used as
Mhm,
mixed drinks. There are some
mhm,
wonderful bourbons out
mhm,
there, but in America, people really don't like bourbons much older than five,
mhm.
7 years. They get a little
Right.
bit overly oaked, people say.
Okay.
And whiskey in the last
Mhm,
couple of years, we've seen extraordinary
mhm.
expressions go out as old as 50, 70, 80 years
Wow.
old in the last couple of years.
Mhm,
So Scotch whiskey can effectively mature in
mhm,
perpetuity, or at least an entire
mhm,
human lifetime,
mhm,
and still be at least sought after. It might be intense, but it will also be
mhm,
extraordinarily scarce, which is
mhm,
the name of the game. So
mhm,
it's that whole maturation process that makes whiskey inside of a barrel
mhm.
one of, in our opinion, the most attractive
Mhm.
asset classes out there. The
Right.
barrel actually
Mhm,
changes the product, and for
mhm,
most people, they think it makes it better. So
mhm,
there are very few things out there, very few assets that
mhm,
actually get better with time.
mhm,
Houses degrade, they
mhm.
get plumbing
Right.
and
Mhm,
electric problems.
mhm.
Paintings,
Yeah.
you have to
Your
take
your
care of them.
car
Life cars,
depreciates the second
cars
you drive it
depreciate,
off the lot.
generally
Mhm,
speaking,
mhm,
right? Almost everything decays over
mhm,
time, but whiskey
mhm,
gets better. And so
mhm,
that's one of the reasons, along with inflation as well
mhm,
as scarcity, that getting invested
mhm,
into an individual
mhm,
barrel or a dozen or 100
mhm,
barrels of whiskey over time, historically,
mhm,
based on our data,
mhm.
has outpaced effectively every other asset class that we've measured against. So
Right.
it goes very well for our clients.
Mhm. And it is very much a quality type of thing. I don't think that you can make whiskey in anything except a barrel. Are there people who are putting it in, oh gosh, those stainless tanks?
Scottish whiskey is so heavily regulated
Hmm.
that you
That's what
can't.
I thought. Yeah.
Yeah, single malt Scotch whiskey is three
Hmm.
ingredients. It's water,
Hmm.
barley, yeast,
Hmm.
and then you have to put it in a barrel for at
Hmm.
least 3 years legally, or it's not
Okay.
whiskey.
Okay.
But as you can see when you go to the liquor store, you
Hmm.
look on the shelves, you're
Hmm.
mostly going to see bottles and expressions that are
Hmm.
12 plus years old because
Right.
that's what people demand
Hmm.
who are
Hmm.
discerning drinkers of
Hmm.
whiskey. So in Scotland, no, you can't
Hmm.
have it rest in a stainless
Okay.
steel drum. It doesn't do
Hmm.
anything for the flavor. It's inert.
Right.
In
If
America,
anything, it would make it worse.
yeah, I mean, yeah. In America, there are some beverages that
Hmm.
are held in stainless
Hmm.
tankers because the regulations are just different here,
Hmm.
but not in Scotland. It's all, I mean, the wood, according to
Hmm.
PhD whiskeyologists,
Hmm.
gives you something like 80% of the final character of the whiskey.
Right.
That's why wood is so important.
Hmm.
And that's why people are very choosy
Hmm.
about the types of wood
Hmm.
that they put their whiskey in. It could
Is it
be
always oak?
all very commonly oak.
Okay.
There are some exceptions and some
Hmm.
crazy mad scientists that we work with that are
Hmm.
trying some different woods, but
Hmm.
oak for the long term has
Hmm.
been shown to be,
Hmm.
the most attractive in terms of
Hmm.
flavor profile. But you can see American bourbon barrels used because they're seasoned with that
Hmm.
bourbon flavor, which gives whiskey an
Okay.
incredible
Uh-huh.
character. You can see Mizunara oak from Japan. You can see IPA barrels,
Hmm.
champagne, white
Hmm.
wine, French wine, sherry, port,
Hmm.
tequila barrels I've seen, mezcal
Hmm.
barrels.
Hmm.
You can get crazy with barrels to give
Hmm.
your Scotch whiskey
Hmm.
really
Hmm.
interesting finishing character. So
Right.
there's a lot of interesting combinations
Hmm.
you can. That's why
Right.
there's 150 distilleries and 60,000 different expressions
Hmm.
of whiskey bottles out
Hmm.
there.
I love it. And my husband is a craft beer fan,
Mhm.
and we've been to several breweries where they use old whiskey barrels
Yeah.
for their to make their beer, and it does give it a totally different taste because not only is it picking up the wood overtones, it is picking up the wood obviously has absorbed
Yeah.
the whiskey, and so it's a very different type of beer, and like with any spirit, or people have their specific taste. They like this, they don't like that. I don't like sweet wine. I like reds, all of those various things. But yeah, beer that has been put in whiskey barrels. Ooh, now it's pretty good stuff.
Yeah. And vice versa. I bet if
Hmm.
you could find, I was talking about that whiskey with an
Hmm.
IPA barrel, and it's very
Hmm.
hard to find.
Hmm.
But if you can pick one up for your husband, I bet he'd probably be a big fan.
Probably. So yeah, I think that would be great. Well, it is this is so interesting, and we mentioned the fact that this is pretty unique. And most people are used to investing in stocks and bonds, right? Whether they do it themselves or they go through a broker. Do they have to, and please give a disclaimer if you need to. They can obviously deal directly with you, and not go through a broker, correct?
So we are a broker.
Okay.
Uh,
So okay, yes, you are. I'm sorry, you mentioned that you are
yeah,
registered with the
we're
SEC. Hmm.
realistically a
Hmm.
dealership for whiskey, right?
Okay.
What we don't produce
Hmm.
any whiskey. What we
Hmm.
do is we have researched and
Hmm.
identified the four distilleries in
Hmm.
Scotland and Japan that we think are the most
Hmm.
attractive investments in the industry.
Hmm.
And we deal
Hmm.
almost exclusively in their
Hmm.
whiskeys. And so people come to us to be their portfolio managers, their
Okay.
advisors in whiskey, to make an allocation that fits within their overall
Hmm.
strategy and help them achieve their goals.
Hmm.
So we are
Hmm.
the professional team of whiskey
Hmm.
investment specialists or international, whiskey
Hmm.
investment specialists. And
Right.
so our job is to be the middleman that gets you
Hmm.
access to something that otherwise
Right.
you quite literally cannot get your hands on.
Right. Well, and you have done obviously the research, and I think that anytime somebody is doing investing, I mean, that really is something that you have to do your research. You want to make sure something is stable. You want to make sure it's going to hold its value. Now, there are certainly short-term investments that have they're very beneficial for people, but it would be pretty hard for just the average person to research whiskey. So that's where I love the fact that you guys do all of that very in-depth, detailed research.
Yeah, and that is a pretty significant barrier to
Hmm.
entry for anybody in any investment
Hmm.
or asset
Hmm.
classes, knowledge and access.
Right.
And to be very clear, whiskey especially in Scotland, is such an insular, tight-knit community. There's not a lot of data to go around. So we try to make it as data rich and transparent as we possibly can. But the major challenges in whiskey investment are transparency and data. How do you know you're getting a high quality barrel or a high quality whiskey? How, especially, do you know you're getting it at a real and fair price, and you're not being charged a bunch of markups and commissions by your broker? Well, we solve for that because when somebody buys a barrel of whiskey from us, they're buying it at the actual factory price from the distillery, the market value. There's no markups. We don't.
So if they were to call them and say, hey, we want to do this, they'd be told the same price.
Yeah, they'd be told the same price. They'd also be told, hey, you've got to talk to Taylor.
Go away.
But yes, you can check the price either online or directly by contacting the distillery. We don't charge markups or broker fees.
Right. Which is why you're a fiduciary, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Well, legally speaking, not a fiduciary anymore, but I do have to provide advice in a client or investor's best interest. That is the legal standard for me as a broker.
Right. Well, and I mean, that obviously makes sense. If you provide bad advice, people aren't going to work with you. It's just, and so, that's the thing. But again, we want people to do their research as to who they're working with, because whether, again, you're investing $5 or millions, you want to make sure, A, that it is safe, and B, that you're going to get a return. I mean, you're not just putting it there to put it there. You want returns on that, and that's where it does get tricky and confusing. And so I love that, you have all this information. Your website has tons of information. I actually didn't sign up because I thought, well, I'm not in that category, so I don't need phone calls, but you've got all sorts of great information. And again, we encourage anybody, when you're going to be working with someone, do your research, make sure that they know what they're doing, because we don't have money to waste. Even if you have millions of dollars, you don't want to waste it, right? That's why you have millions of dollars.
Yeah. I encourage everybody to look around. We're not the only people in the world that do what we do, but we're the only people that are doing it right, in my opinion. There are no other firms out there that, are focused on premium Scottish and Japanese whiskey that have a regulated issuance of securities that are distributed and overseen by a registered broker dealer. There's literally nobody else that has the level of oversight and kind of the secure investing environment that we do. So we're very proud that we have spent a lot of money and resources coming to America and doing it right, because other people have tried in the past and done it wrong. And the SEC said, no, you can't do that. So we decided to go a different route, and people feel very comfortable and confident. Even though it is really hard to deal with Securities and Exchange Commission rules and regulations, they're there for a reason.
Right. They're there to protect the investors.
Keep investors as protected as possible.
Right. And obviously, nothing is guaranteed, folks. Always remember that. Nothing is guaranteed. Death and taxes, right? Isn't that what they say? And there are ways to at least get around some of the taxes. We can't get around death, but always remember that there is risk, and some people are risk adverse and some people like risk. It's funny when I was much younger and doing my own investing, I liked risk because I like to see the big numbers, right? But I also knew those big numbers could become really small numbers really pretty fast. And cardinal rule, never invest what you can't afford to lose, right? And so I was very careful about all of that. But then I married someone who is in the industry of the financial world, who went, oh no, none, not this risky stuff, right? Yeah. Which has obviously made us have a much better portfolio now. But it's but what I love is that there are so many options that are out there. And and there are some who are just going to do the S&P. They're just going to do whatever, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine. But it's so much fun to see that there are these very cool options that people can do.
Yeah, and any financial professional, including your partner, will tell you it's all about your mix and your allocation, right?
Oh, diversification is key.
Yeah, and you can be in the S&P 500 even if you're approaching or in your retirement years,
Mhm.
but it's going to be generally a smaller portion of your
Right.
portfolio.
Mhm.
People generally come to me and come
Mhm.
to whiskey because they want to actually reduce the
Mhm.
overall volatility and risk in
Right.
their portfolio,
Mhm.
right? The quote risks in whiskey are
Mhm.
very different. It's not so
Mhm.
much a significant risk of losing
Mhm.
money because whiskey matures and gets better with
Mhm.
age and
Mhm.
generally in history has
Mhm.
increased in value over
Mhm.
time. So it's not so much about losing significant amounts of
Mhm.
money. It is just the fact that you can only be in it if you're a long-term
Right.
investor.
Mhm.
Otherwise, we're going to say don't do this.
Mhm.
This is not about quick flips. It's not
Mhm.
about turning
Mhm.
a crypto Bitcoin
Right.
profit in a couple
Mhm.
of months or a year or whatever. It's about
Mhm.
being in it for 5,
Mhm.
10. Some people tell me they're in it
Mhm.
for 15 or 20 years.
Mhm.
I'm the same way. I bought the
Mhm.
same barrels of, or I bought the first barrels of whiskey here in
Mhm.
America within our offering,
Mhm.
and I'm in it for probably a 20-year
Mhm.
time frame.
Mhm.
So, yeah, whiskey, because it's relatively stable and quasi
Mhm.
illiquid, it just kind of sits there and holds value, and gets
Mhm.
appraised once a year,
Right.
generally ticks up in value once a
Mhm.
year. So it's a way to just be a
Mhm.
relatively stable
Mhm.
cornerstone within your portfolio that just kind of stores value and
Mhm.
accretes over time.
Right. So I'm assuming that at some point, these casks that people have invested in are actually sold. So, because, yeah, we want them to sit there for a long time, but yeah, they have to be sold or we don't have whiskey that we can consume, right? So is that when people make the bulk of their money and then they can either completely cash out or they reinvest all those various things?
Yeah. So just like any other capital
Mm-hmm.
appreciation investment, the money is, or the profit is when you
Mm-hmm.
actually liquidate and
Right.
sell. So that's why we help with the entire process. We're
Mm-hmm.
not just, leaving you with a
Mm-hmm.
barrel and going away. We're there
Mm-hmm.
to help take care of it and have a government bonded,
Mm-hmm.
privately insured warehouse for
Mm-hmm.
however many years you
Mm-hmm.
want. And then eventually we're going to help you sell the
Mm-hmm.
barrel on to whoever the next owner
Mm-hmm.
is. That could be another investor,
Mm-hmm.
either internally or externally
Mm-hmm.
to us. That could be the distillery because
Mm-hmm.
their name is on the barrel and they can make
Mm-hmm.
a lot of money from
Mm-hmm.
continuing to hold it and bottling it.
Mm-hmm.
Or we'll sell it to a bottling firm, an independent bottler,
Okay.
because they need
Mm-hmm.
barrels of whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they have nothing to bottle, like you
Mm-hmm.
said. But at the end of the day, most of our clients aren't drinking all of their whiskey or bottling all of their
Mm-hmm.
whiskey. You can,
Right.
uh, but most people are treating it like you would a piece of land or
Right.
that $1 million
Mm-hmm.
Picasso. You're
Mm-hmm.
just going to sell it on to its next
Mm-hmm.
enjoyer, who is also going to
Mm-hmm.
take some years and probably
Mm-hmm.
profit off of it eventually.
Right. I love it. And I mean, I'm fascinated with the fact that conceivably you could go visit your barrel, right? Take your picture with it.
Yeah.
Now, clearly this is not, you're just going to pop up and do it, because these, like you said, they're tightly regulated. You're not just wandering into these places. But I just, and I don't know why I think that would be so much fun to go and take a picture with my barrel, or
Yeah.
barrels. And so but that does lead me to, and you and I are part of C-Suite Network, and that is how we were introduced to each other. And I believe one of the questions that was asked when we were all, one of our networking things was tastings. Do you do tastings?
Yeah. Tastings are primarily for actual investors
Right.
only.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, I can't just go. Oh.
yeah, I mean, we'll have you, Deb. You've had me on your podcast. We're friends now.
Hmm.
Uh, we call it the whiskey vault because
Hmm.
it's a members only space. We
Right.
don't
Hmm.
have people come
And
on
it
off.
is a perk of being an
It is a
investor.
perk.
Hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, absolutely. We bring people in and people that are part of
Hmm.
the team and members and investors
Hmm.
here. Absolutely. We'd love to host you and your
Hmm.
friends. I've had several of our investors here
Hmm.
for some wonderful whiskey
Hmm.
tastings, the C-Suite network.
Hmm.
Occasionally we have
Hmm.
some lovely gatherings here as
Hmm.
well. But certainly,
Hmm.
we built this beautiful room
Hmm.
because we want to
Hmm.
share whiskey with the world.
Right. Right.
We could have put together a call center
Hmm.
in the middle of
Yeah.
nowhere, just
Yeah.
made phone calls all day, but we
Hmm.
built this beautiful
Hmm.
room. And this is not a fake background. This is a
Hmm.
real whiskey.
Wow. Okay. I did. I assumed that it was a fake background.
This is our
Good.
beautiful space in
Hmm.
Midtown Manhattan.
Hmm.
And we built it because we wanted to share
Hmm.
whiskey with the world.
Hmm.
Because at the end of the day, even though we do this for profit, we
Hmm.
share the wealth of whiskey with
Hmm.
people. We do it because we love and
Hmm.
believe in whiskey in a big way.
Right. I love that. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a person walking back there. Yeah. It's and one of the things that I, of course, discovered is that fine Scotch is savored. This is not, let's see how many shots we can consume in, this is for grown-ups. you know and so that is part of this, is and maybe again that's part of the mystique, part of the history. This is really something that you do consume and enjoy. And when we were doing one of the tastings, somebody did the let's take this shot glass, and oh, they were not, the people doing it were not happy. They were like, oh, no,
Right.
no, this is
Yeah.
it truly is. And somebody I believe has trademarked this, the sipping whiskey, but it all is. I mean, it is this something that is savored. And we also discovered that ice, no.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few wrong ways to drink a whiskey. Shooting it back is, I'd say, wrong.
Yeah,
Mixing
because
it
you
with
do
a
want to
Coke is
savor it.
wrong. Yeah, I mean, look, this whiskey spent maybe 10, 20, 30
Right.
years in a barrel to get to your mouth to spend
Enjoy
30
it.
seconds in there. Respect it, is my opinion. But
Right.
some whiskeys do really well with a drop of water, especially if they're full strength and they haven't been diluted at all.
Yeah, you might need to dilute it a little bit.
It helps to open up the aromas in the oils
Right.
and actually makes it a more enjoyable experience. And some whiskeys
Mhm.
actually are good with this very small, very or one, big ice cube so it doesn't water the whiskey down too much, but gives it a little bit of chill
Right.
and it will mellow out the intensity for some whiskeys. But like you mentioned, for most people in the industry, they've put a lot of care into designing their expression of whiskey to be enjoyed straight.
Right.
So that's
Right.
how they appreciate you to enjoy. But
Right.
everybody can do what they want.
Right. And it is, to me, it's very much like wine. If you have a fine wine, you are going to sip it. You're not going to mix it. You are not going to put ice cubes in it. And I remember one time I was with a friend of mine who is very much a wine connoisseur, and I thought she was going to pass out when somebody mixed red and white because they wanted pink.
I don't think that's how that works.
No, and it was like, oh dear. But yeah, I mean, it is something, and it's not just that you're savoring it is a whole experience, right? You're doing this with friends. Now obviously, you can be sitting there watching TV or doing whatever, but yeah, it's the whole experience. And same with wine. It's you're with friends, you're savoring, you're enjoying it, you're pairing it with the right foods, all of those various things.
Yeah, I mean, a whiskey can be a very multi-sensory experience, right? You put it in a glass, you can swirl it around, enjoy the beautiful color, the amber, the gold, the red, the orange. You look at the oils as they cling to the sides, the legs, as they call them in wine and whiskey. Enjoy the nose. The nose to me is probably one of the
Right.
most enjoyable parts of the whiskey.
Which if you're in a shot glass, no,
Yeah.
that's why you have a larger glass.
A beautiful whiskey like a Glencairn glass or a very specifically designed whiskey to let it breathe so that you can breathe it in and enjoy it. And then, after all that, and sometimes you can be appreciating whiskey for minutes and minutes or hours without even trying it.
Right.
But eventually, expose your palate to it and see what you can pick out. And the fascinating thing about humans, obviously, is we're all such unique creatures built of our own memories and sense or scent is one of the most powerful triggering mechanisms in our brains. So, what I pull out of a whiskey might be wildly different for you. Sometimes you can get emotions and thoughts and feelings just from a whiff of whiskey from some ancient memory that you forgot about. It could be Granny's apple pie, or for me, a lot of peaty or smoky whiskeys will remind me of being a teenager on the beach in California. Some of my favorite memories being around a campfire.
Right.
So yeah, you can get such extraordinary and complex sensory experiences out of all just water, barley, and yeast, which is what's incredible.
Right. Yeah, and it is what I love is that you say it's different for everybody, because when I've gone to tastings, whether it's beer, wine, spirits, they will say, now you will, you'll get the oaky. And I'm like, nah, I'm not getting it. And I might pick up on a fruit or, obviously something else. And so I always find that fascinating too, is everybody's nose is different. Now, clearly the nose. I mean, the people who are doing this, they have very well trained noses, whether it's perfume, whether it's whatever they're doing. But and again, food makes a huge difference. If I'm going to have a stout beer, you better have chocolate cake, right?
Right. Yeah.
And but it's about the memories. The other day somebody was talking to me about Coors Light. Okay, right. Now I'm from Colorado. And
Yeah.
so, we all, you're from not where they had Coors, where you had to ship it, right? Where you had to sneak it across the lines. Um,
Right.
and so, once we were of legal age, because we wouldn't drink illegally,
No,
yes, no. It was Coors Light. It was available, it was cheap. And so, that memory to me is of high school, not high school, college. Yeah, right. College. Um,
college. Yeah.
and the the get-togethers with friends then. And now it's like I suppose if it was the only thing, I would drink Coors Light, but it's not, it just doesn't have the appeal anymore that it did. And but I am one of those, I very rarely actually consume any type of alcohol. So when I do, I want to make sure I enjoy it. Which is part of why in the cabinet downstairs we have the expensive bottles of Scotch whiskey, and things like that. Because if I'm going to have one, I'm going to enjoy it, and that's what I love about it. And, somebody else might think, okay, several beers are great.
Yeah. I mean, what you're talking about is actually a really, I mean, in America, definitely globally, we're seeing it
Mm-hmm.
more and more
Mm-hmm.
is a word called premiumization, which is
Mm-hmm.
really important because we are seeing a trend,
Mm-hmm.
especially in younger generations,
Mm-hmm.
that people are drinking less
Mm-hmm.
alcohol,
Right.
less
Mm-hmm.
volumes
Mm-hmm.
of actual
Mm-hmm.
alcohol. And that's for a variety of
Mm-hmm.
reasons. It's still hugely popular in an enormous industry.
Mm-hmm.
But what we can see is that people are actually spending more money
Mm-hmm.
on better
Right.
spirits and
Mm-hmm.
better
Mm-hmm.
beers.
Right.
And last year, the entire spirits industry,
Mm-hmm.
the entire
Mm-hmm.
world almost,
Mm-hmm.
actually saw slight decreases in basically the
Mm-hmm.
business. And people were drinking less
Mm-hmm.
and the stuff was worth a little bit less.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just because it was
Right.
2022 was such a crazy good
Mm-hmm.
year coming back
Mm-hmm.
from COVID.
Mm-hmm.
2023 was
Yeah.
like
Everybody was like, we can get out, we
yeah,
can
the
drink.
liquor stores are open now. Thank you. So it was kind of a return after a bumper year, so it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't unexpected.
Mm-hmm.
But the things that bucked the trend
Mm-hmm.
are single malt Scotch whiskey
Mm-hmm.
was actually up
Mm-hmm.
10% when
Right.
everything else was down,
Mm-hmm.
premium whiskey,
Mm-hmm.
and Japanese whiskey was
Mm-hmm.
also doing very well.
Right.
So, premium
Mm-hmm.
spirits, most respected spirits in the
Mm-hmm.
world are sort of
Mm-hmm.
right.
Right. Well, and let's be honest, everybody is maturing, and I think our palates mature as we do that. So the millennials are now discovering all of
Mhm.
these things. And there's a heck of a lot of millennials, right? So, as they discover those, and and it's interesting because we talk about millennials in so many different ways, and I'm assuming you're a millennial, that they want in general more from life. And so they're not at their job simply to get a paycheck. They want to know where they're working makes a difference. They want to raise their families differently. They want to live differently. And for anybody who fusses, that's my generation, I remind them, hello, we raised them. And so, but yeah, we've got all these millennials who are now going, oh, I like this idea.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, me and a lot of other people, I
Mm-hmm.
think, really do everything that we do in life
Mm-hmm.
to seek and to have really high quality
Mm-hmm.
experiences. That can mean a lot of things,
Mm-hmm.
having high quality products, high
Mm-hmm.
quality spirits that we
Right.
enjoy. And that experience
Mm-hmm.
is in and of itself really
Mm-hmm.
wonderful to have a great whiskey.
Mm-hmm.
But also, at the end of the day, a whiskey is there to bring a group of people together to have a
Mm-hmm.
whiskey with a friend, to build
Right.
community. That's one
Mm-hmm.
of the reasons why we have the C-suite network
Mm-hmm.
here.
Mm-hmm.
Month is to get
Mm-hmm.
some wonderful people into
Mm-hmm.
in a room to enjoy some great whiskeys and to enjoy
Mm-hmm.
each other's company. And those are the high quality
Right.
experiences that a great
Mm-hmm.
whiskey can make
Mm-hmm.
happen when you have the right people and the right spirit in the
Right.
room.
Right. And again, you're slowly consuming. And so it's not, let's get, because right now it's March Madness, right? And so a lot of people are going to bars and drinking lots. But yeah, when you're drinking a fine Scotch whiskey, you're consuming it more slowly. Now it's probably a little bit more potent, but yeah, it is you can enjoy things a lot longer.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, where do you see things going from here? I mean, is it that, that people, we've kind of been touching on this, will we start, seeing maybe not, obviously not Scotch whiskey, but more high end type of investment type of opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing it a lot, and for investors, a lot of choices good, but a lot of
Mhm.
choices also hard. How do you
Right. Because
filter?
then you're like, oh, I just don't know.
Yeah,
Hmm.
it gets hard.
Hmm.
And us being here and pioneering this
Hmm.
industry and especially with the structure that we do,
Hmm.
there's a huge amount of opportunity
Hmm.
for us to, get the word out and
Hmm.
educate people on what's
Hmm.
possible and why this is so attractive. But it's also brand new to so many people.
Hmm.
So we, I mean, to be very candid with
Hmm.
you, whiskey is such a production is so limited.
Hmm.
There's very little whiskey to go
Right.
around, which is why
Hmm.
it's such an attractive niche
Hmm.
against supply and demand.
Hmm.
But we would like to introduce Americans to whiskey as an asset class because people have been
Hmm.
doing it around the world for
Hmm.
decades. Americans have been left out.
Right.
So we are seeing more and more and more entrants into the
Hmm.
alternative space, and some people are doing a wonderful job and doing great work
Hmm.
for their clients. And because it's a bit of the Wild West,
Hmm.
some people are not. We
Hmm.
try to be the former and
Hmm.
be as transparent and high integrity as we can. That's why we do all the work that we do to
Hmm.
bring the best whiskey to America.
Hmm.
Um, but Americans do have a lot of choice now, which is a
Hmm.
good thing. You just do need to be very circumspect
Hmm.
about what assets you're getting into
Hmm.
and make sure they're the right choice for you.
Hmm.
So that's why we work hand in hand with
Hmm.
everybody, making sure they're eligible, qualified, and that whiskey
Hmm.
really can actually benefit
Hmm.
their portfolios in a big way.
Right. And you've mentioned, and this is so very true. This is very unique. Are there any other food or beverage products where people can invest like this? I was trying to think of some. I mean, it's not like, that's my box of Cheerios,
Yeah.
right? It's, and now obviously they can invest in the conglomerates, but that's just a regular stock or bond, where you're buying something that is, P&G or, whatever. But are there any other type of products that are similar to this?
It's a pretty sparse field, and that's because most food and beverages don't have that longevity that whiskey
Right.
and spirits do. So Scotch whiskey is, in my opinion, probably the tip of the pyramid in terms of
Hmm.
attractiveness of
Hmm.
a spirit
Hmm.
or, a food and beverage
Hmm.
commodity
Hmm.
because it can last so long and
Right.
continue to make attractive
Hmm.
returns for so long.
Hmm.
It makes it a really great
Hmm.
long-term part of your portfolio that you don't have to worry
Hmm.
about. People have been making money on wine barrel investing
Right.
for a long time.
That would be about the only thing similar that I could think of would be wine.
Yeah. So wine bottles and wine
Hmm.
barrels, it's a little bit less predictable
Hmm.
than whiskey
Hmm.
for a variety of just
Right.
this
Yeah. The weather. I mean, all sorts
whether
of
the
things. Yeah.
terroir and
Hmm.
each year vintage can be different. It's not the
Hmm.
same. Whiskey is just very
Hmm.
consistent because of the
Hmm.
distillation process. But people make good money on wine
Hmm.
barrels and futures. I mean, there are American bourbon companies out there
Hmm.
who do barrel
Hmm.
investing. They are very different markets
Hmm.
than Scotch because they're a
Right.
very American
Hmm.
focused product. And
And
uh,
bourbon is not such a long-term product.
yeah,
Things like that. Hmm.
usually after 5 or 7 years, you
Hmm.
really got to get rid of it
Hmm.
and hopefully make a profit.
Hmm.
Whereas Scotch can just go very, very long term
Hmm.
potentially. Otherwise they have there are platforms out there for getting into
Hmm.
like farmland and sometimes taking
Hmm.
advantage of part of the yield of the farmland,
Hmm.
forest
Hmm.
investments, but it's not a very big industry
Right.
or alternative
Hmm.
asset class outside of those ones that I
Right.
can think of.
Well, and you mentioned there are for those others a lot of outside factors. Weather obviously would be the biggest. And I mean, COVID. Wars. I mean, there's just so many things that can affect what happens to many of those other things. And yeah. For one thing, Scotland is way up there. Not a lot of people pay attention to Scotland. It's an island. you know, and has been doing just what it's been doing for hundreds of years without really any issues. You can
Yeah.
even change from a queen to a king, and there's not a problem.
Easy. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so no economy is immune
Mhm.
from changes and ups and
Right.
downs. And Scotch whiskey
Mhm.
is the same. But
Mhm.
if you compared like the last 150
Mhm.
or so
Mhm.
years of the stock market as it's existed
Mhm.
in America versus, the Scotch whiskey
Mhm.
economy or marketplace, it has had significantly fewer and less intense downturns.
Mhm.
In America, we've seen five major downturns in the
Mhm.
last 10 or 20 years and
Right.
like really sometimes devastating
Mhm.
downturns that are ruining
Mhm.
lives. In Scotch whiskey, they had the whiskey
Mhm.
lock, which was a bit of a overproduction
Mhm.
versus demand in the 80s.
Mhm.
And there was a little bit of a lull in the 50s and
Mhm.
60s just due to shifting
Mhm.
changes. Prohibition was
Mhm.
initially kind of rough, but then the bootleggers got their hands on scotch, so they
Yeah.
had those boom
Mhm.
times.
Mhm. Like we
Um,
said, good and bad times. People are going to drink.
yeah, exactly. So, even though there are potentially downturns,
Mhm.
when you're in it for the long term,
Mhm.
even if there's a 1 or 2 year
Mhm.
reduction in
Mhm.
demand or market
Mhm.
velocity, at the end of the day, this whiskey is going to be living in that warehouse for
Mhm.
5, 10, 15, 20
Mhm.
years. Just wait. And every year you wait, it
Right.
gets 1 year older and potentially
Mhm.
more valuable.
Right. I would guess that the whole COVID situation didn't really do too much to affect the industry. I mean, people still produced because it is not a factory. And so it wasn't like you all of a sudden had hundreds of people that couldn't go to work. It just kept going merrily along.
Yeah, I mean, there were precautions in
Mhm.
place, and
Right.
obviously everybody has a bit of a brave new
Mhm.
world, but um, the distilleries kept on humming for the
Mhm.
most part.
They're
Uh,
considered an essential industry.
yes, realistically,
Let's be
we're
honest,
almost
in
never.
Scotland, they would be.
It's
Mhm.
they're not. Yeah, it's in Scotland. It's the number one export.
Mhm.
It's a huge driver
Mhm.
of taxes for the
Mhm.
crown and production and
Mhm.
local wages. So they, for the most part,
Mhm.
kept on humming.
Mhm.
They made it work. There was a little bit of a decrease in exports, and that was just because
Right.
everything basically
People
was
weren't going out to consume.
right. There were no
Mhm.
liquor stores.
Mhm.
People were buying a lot of stuff
Mhm.
online.
Mhm.
So it was weird,
Mhm.
weird times, obviously, but
Mhm.
they moved merrily
Mhm.
along, and now we're
Mhm.
again back at record
Right.
exports. So it's
Mhm.
and a ton of people got into this as a hobby in the
Mhm.
last 4 or 5 years, right? It's something
Ah.
you can
Mhm.
do virtually. You can do
Mhm.
virtual tastings. You can
Mhm.
buy online. You can
Mhm.
read. So
Mhm.
the whiskey world has
Mhm.
exploded in the last
Mhm.
5 years. COVID was actually
Mhm.
quite good
Right.
for whiskey aficionados and the
Mhm.
growth of it as a
Right.
hobby.
Yeah. We did a virtual wine tasting that was fascinating. It was something through my husband's company when they normally would have gotten together physically. And so we all got these shipments of wine, and the spouses were allowed to participate because they figured, they're going to no matter what, so we might as well encourage it. And obviously it was a very select group of people. This was not, not a whole bunch. And they also sent the appropriate food. Now, unfortunately, it sat in the Georgia sun, and so we kind of lost some of our food. But it was like being in person because we had the wine sommelier who was explaining, all these things, and it was, take a sip and eat a bite, and and absorb the sniff for a while, and and twirl the glass. I mean, because we got glasses. I mean, all sorts. It really was truly like being in person and it was fascinating to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, people, I mean, it's such a rich and deep industry. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people get into whiskey with some
Mm-hmm.
of the big global names, and then you
Mm-hmm.
find out, oh, wow, this is good. I should
Right.
learn more. I should
Mm-hmm.
experiment. And
Mm-hmm.
there are really very,
Mm-hmm.
truly interesting
Mm-hmm.
and rare bottles
Mm-hmm.
that you can get into, and very interesting and rare
Mm-hmm.
barrels you can get into
Mm-hmm.
if you try. So it goes deep. Like I
Mm-hmm.
said, there's $8 billion worth of the stuff just at
Wow.
wholesale export that
Mm-hmm.
leaves Scotland every year to go
Mm-hmm.
around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And from 150
Mm-hmm.
distilleries, 150
Mm-hmm.
production facilities
Mm-hmm.
in Scotland,
Right.
there are like 60,000 different expressions or
Mm-hmm.
types of bottles that are
Mm-hmm.
out there. So huge,
Mm-hmm.
deep, rich, and
Right.
interesting. world
Mhm.
to explore,
Mhm.
and that's just Scotland. Don't even think
Mhm.
about Japan, which is a whole
Right.
other.
Yeah. Yeah. And then obviously some of the others. But yeah, I mean, and like I said, I mean, to me, this is fascinating because who knew that you could buy a cask?
Nobody knows in
Yeah.
America. Nobody knows.
No,
It's
no.
We're very excited to be
Yeah.
bringing the idea
Right.
to this country.
Hmm.
Whether you're a whiskey
Hmm.
person or not,
Right.
people just kind of understand that
Hmm.
generally the older a
Hmm.
whiskey gets, the more people will pay
Right.
for it. So
Right.
if you have time
Hmm.
and capital and
Hmm.
patience, buy
Hmm.
barrels of whiskey. It can
Right.
be very, very
Right.
attractive in the long term.
And again, folks, they're not sending you the casks. You don't have to store them. They live where they're going to be properly taken care of, and all of those things. But it's just like when you buy any other type of investment, it really doesn't come to you in most cases. But yeah, I mean, just like I said, I would love to invest in and go have my picture taken with my cask. I just think that would be so much fun. But yeah, I mean, I love that this is so unique, and that you're doing such a fascinating and great job with it.
Thank you. Yeah, we put a lot of time and effort and
Hmm.
consideration into bringing this to this
Hmm.
country. To
Hmm.
find the best partners in the
Hmm.
world, the best whiskey, the best
Hmm.
deal, to be able to offer it to
Hmm.
people at an actual fair
Hmm.
price with no markups is really
Hmm.
pretty extraordinary.
Hmm.
So, we're excited to be
Hmm.
here, and would love to invite you to come by Whiskey Vault next time you're in Manhattan.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Well, that does bring us pretty close to the end of the program. Tell us a little bit more about how people can get information about Braeburn. See, I did it right. Braeburn, right? We got to get the right in there. So Braeburn whiskey, and we will have your LinkedIn profile in our notes because that's a great way to reach you. But how do people find out more about this industry?
Well, come on the website. So we're an international business.
Mhm.
We are a regulated issuer of
Mhm.
securities in the United States. We've got a US specific website and investor application as we have to by law.
Mhm.
So Americans come on braeburnwhiskey.com or
Mhm.
Google Braeburn Whiskey, you'll come right to us. That's BRAEBURN whiskey with no E.
No E.
And Deb will put that on the screen, I'm
Mhm.
sure. My name again is Taylor Costa Van Putten. I run the American business and manage the sales team here, and for certain clients, actually help work as their
Mhm.
portfolio manager. So we might work together
Cool.
directly should you apply.
I love it.
International folks, people
Mhm.
who are outside the United States, we're happy to work with you. Sometimes international, especially wealth managers, family
Mhm.
offices, institutions, might be best served by talking to me here in
Mhm.
America because we have this issue of securities. And
Mhm.
sometimes they might be best off by talking to our
Right.
international teams. But
Mhm.
apply online, and
Mhm.
we'll get you referred to the right
Mhm.
place and take good care of you and find out
Mhm.
whether whiskey should be a part of your portfolio.
Right. Right. I didn't ask the obvious question. Do you have your favorite that you drink?
I, like you, don't drink a ton of
Mhm.
alcohol, but when I do, I enjoy an extremely high quality Scotch or
Mhm.
Japanese whiskey, right? I am a big fan of our distillery partners, and that's
Mhm.
one of the reasons why we chose them
Right.
is
Mhm.
whiskey pretty damn good.
Mhm.
The Annandale distillery, which has been reopened
Mhm.
10 years ago, has some incredible
Mhm.
both peated and unpeated whiskey out on the
Mhm.
shelves. Gets rave reviews. It won double gold in San
Ooh.
Francisco and a
Mhm.
variety of other great
Mhm.
competitions. And if you're in the lowlands of Scotland, they've got a five-star beautiful hotel and
Mhm.
restaurant. Absolutely a
Mhm.
smashing place. And the whiskey is extremely good. So that's one of my top choices.
Mhm.
If I'm having a good steak or something else hearty and I need a smoky, peaty whiskey as
Mhm.
a pairing, I usually look into a Lagavulin.
I love it. I love it. Well, oh my gosh, Taylor, do you have any final thoughts that you want to leave everyone with?
There's a great saying in Scotland. If you take care of the whiskey will take care of you. And that's what we believe in. And that's what we try to embody and accomplish for our clients. We're here from day one to day 1,000 or day 30,000, whatever this journey is going to look like for you. We're here the entire length of the investment term. We want you to foster the best whiskey portfolio you possibly can because eventually somebody is going to really enjoy that whiskey thanks to you. So do right by the whiskey and it'll do right by you. And that's why we try to do right by our clients. So anybody here that's curious, I don't care if you want to invest today or tomorrow or 10 weeks. Next year, let's talk. Let's figure out whether whiskey should be a part of your portfolio. We're also very happy to accept referrals. Half of our business around the world is people telling their friends about us. So you have a friend that you think I should talk to, let me know.
Perfect. I love it. Well, I'm Deb Creer. I've been having such fun discussing whiskey on an early morning. Didn't have any, just had my coffee, right? But I've been having a wonderful discussion with Taylor Costa Van Putten of Braeburn Whiskey. And until next time, everyone have a great day.
Tune in for our next program for even more trends, best practices, and techniques for how to make your business a success. The Business Power Hour, hosted by Deb Creer, is proud to be part of the C-Suite Network.